morning, Bucknutters. Welcome into the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, November 13th, 2015. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by Brandon Castel. BCast, obviously TMZ released the dash cam video from JT Barrett's OVI citation. I had to play it back 100 times to actually make sure my hearing wasn't, I wasn't losing my hearing. So I didn't hear him say, "I'm the Ohio State quarterback." And I finally heard a kind of a muzzled, "I'm the Ohio State quarterback." And then he said, "Officer, isn't there anything you can do?" And people across the nation are jumping on this. I don't have a problem with this at all. I think I would have had a problem if he didn't say something like that. I say that half jokingly, but does this change anything in your opinion, the way that he handled it, or anything about this? Does the dash cam video change anything from your perspective, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, Dave. I had to watch this thing a number of times, and had they just released it and said, "What do you think?" I wouldn't have really thought much of it. Obviously those folks at TMZ are pretty good, and they've got a trained ear to hear some of these videos that they would get recordings of. And so I agree. There was some point where I heard a muffled something about Ohio State. I really don't even know if that's for sure what he said, but yeah, I mean, for me, it is what it is. I mean, I'm not surprised when you think about someone getting pulled over at an OVI check stop. I mean, that's kind of what I anticipated it looking like and feeling like. I thought it was pretty standard for everything that I could imagine it to have been. And you're right, I would have been surprised if you're living in Columbus, Ohio. I mean, it's not like he was aggressive or he was, talking down to the officer and saying, like, "Do you realize who I am? I'm going to have your job for this." That's where I think it would have been a little embarrassing, and it might have changed my opinion. But letting the officer know he's the quarterback of Ohio State is just smart. So, again, it's not a good situation. You never want to see your quarterback in handcuffs. I think anytime you see something like that, it's a little bit of a shock to the system if you're an Ohio State fan or an Ohio State coach. So not a good situation that I want to make light of, because it is a serious situation, but I think it's something we can put behind us. And the video, for me, doesn't do anything to change that. I think it's about par for the course.
Urban Meyer confirmed the Buckeyes are making a change at kicker. The old kicker is now the new kicker. Sean Nurnberger moving back into his old role. Interestingly, coming into the season, Jack Willoughby was not expected to be the field goal kicker. He had never kicked field goals in his career, didn't play high school football, was a soccer player, went to Duke, was a kickoff specialist there for a couple of years. Willoughby won the kicking job over Nurnberger in camp, and that was a surprise. Nurnberger wasn't great last year, BCast, but he was 13 of 20 on field goals. That was better than Mike Nugent was as a true freshman. I didn't think Nurnberger was going to turn into Nugent, 2002 when Nugent really broke out as a sophomore, but I thought he'd be pretty good. So it was surprising that Willoughby initially won the job. Willoughby hasn't been terrible. I looked at the stats. He's 7 of 11. It's easy to see why a change needed to be made, though, that it didn't seem to have the confidence, and they're going back to Sean Nurnberger. Your thoughts on that, BCast?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's a kicking situation on a team that you don't anticipate, or you didn't coming into the season anticipate needing to kick a lot, at least on field goals. So I think some of the little bit of the struggles in the red zone early on led to some longer field goals and some things that we didn't expect. So, I'm not entirely surprised they made the change. I mean, if you look at Jack Willoughby, he's 4 of 4 inside of 30. He's 3 of 4 in that 30 to 39 range. So he's been very good, 7 of 8 from inside of 39. But he has not hit a kick this year outside of 39 yards. He's 0 for 3 of over 39 yards. And to me, that's what you're looking at. You're saying we got to get somebody that if we need 3 points in one of these tight games against Michigan, Michigan State, Iowa potentially in the Big Ten championship game and beyond, that we need somebody that has enough leg to get it there. Is Nurnberg the guy? I look back at his numbers from last year. He was 8 of 10 from inside of 30. Didn't have a kick in the 30 to 39 range, which tells you a little bit about this offense last year. And then he was 5 of 10 from over 40 yards. So, again, they're still looking for that guy who can hit that 40-plus yard field goal. Nurnberg at least showed he could do it last year. He was 50%. I don't know. I guess you go back to the young guy and hope that you can develop him over the next couple of years and you get a consistent kicker. To me, the thing that concerned me about Willoughby was he's kicked the ball out of bounds 5 times on kickoffs this season. And to me, that's been a concern if you're in a tight game, or, if you score a big touchdown late and you take the lead and your kicker kicks it out of bounds and you give them great field position. That's where you struggle. I look back to last year, though. Nurnberg was not even their kickoff guy last year. It was Kyle Clinton, and he kicked the ball out of bounds 7 times. So it's kind of an ongoing issue for this team, is this ability to not kick the ball out of bounds on kickoffs. It'll be interesting to see who handles kickoffs from this point forward, whether it is Nurnberg or Willoughby. But, I'm not surprised. They needed to probably move on to a guy who was going to be here for a little longer. But it's something to keep an eye on because, they've kicked the ball 4 more times in that 30 to 39 range this season than they did last year. So something just to keep an eye on. Not going to change the real outcome of the season, but you never know when you're going to need a clutch kick.
Yeah, Coach Meyer did say that Willoughby is going to hold on to the kickoff specialist duties, and I hear what you're saying about the kicks going out of bounds. Every time it happens, I do a face palm. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. Then I remember they're very aggressive with this. I mean, they go for that coffin corner. I think, and a lot of times they'll pin teams inside the 20, which is huge now with touchbacks giving teams the ball at the 25. Often Ohio State's pinning teams, inside the 15. So I think it kind of goes with the territory. With them being that aggressive, a few kicks are going to go out of bounds. But I agree, there's too many last year, 7 out of Kyle Clinton, including a huge one in the Virginia Tech game when Ohio State had the momentum and then he kicked the ball out of bounds. So that's going to happen sometimes. I understand that, but it does happen too much. One thing that's interesting to me is if you kick the ball out of bounds, the other team gets the ball at the 35. I feel like it should be a bigger penalty. Like if you kick the ball out of bounds, it should be the other team gets the ball at the 40 because it's only a 10-yard difference between a touchback and kicking the ball out of bounds. I don't understand the rationale there, but it does sound like Jack Willoughby will keep the kickoff job. Okay, moving forward here, Buckeyes are expected to get Parris Campbell back tomorrow for the Illinois game. Now, they were very high on Parris Campbell entering the year, and I still think this kid's going to be a future star. I love everything about him. But the rust factor, just how much is he going to play? My question to you, BCast, what kind of impact do you anticipate Parris Campbell's going to have, not just tomorrow, but for the remainder of the season?
It's a great question. I mean, it's a good time to get a guy back. They've been pretty banged up at wide receiver. Obviously losing Noah Brown before the season, losing Corey Smith during the season. Both of those guys are out for the year. Dontre Wilson hasn't played much. Obviously, he's more of an H-back inside guy. But those are the 3 guys that you could have seen having a much bigger role on this offense as the season went along. And then Parris Campbell has really been out for most of the year as well. So, yeah, I think it's good to get a guy like that back, and I'm with you, Dave. I think that Parris Campbell has a lot of talent. Obviously for a guy like that had not played to kind of force his way into the lineup early in the season, before the injuries, I think that says a lot about what they think of Parris Campbell. I think he's a guy that has some serious speed. I think he's a guy that could be a pretty good receiver once he kind of gets the nuances of the position down and really understands what it takes to play football and play receiver at this level. That being said, do I think that Parris Campbell is going to suddenly come back, now and be some kind of game breaker for the Buckeyes? It's hard for me to think that we're going to see that this far into the season. A guy who struggled with some nerves or maybe just wasn't quite ready for the spotlight early in the season. If you think back about a couple of the drops that he had when he was on the field, I don't think that'll impact the rest of his career. But, I could see them getting him in there, obviously, because they are thin at receiver. But clearly Michael Thomas, Jalen Marshall are your 2 top receivers right now. And then you're going to see a lot of Braxton Miller and some of the others, Curtis Samuel in the slot. But they really don't have a lot of other guys that they're going to use outside. They've used a little bit of guys like Jeff Green and Johnny Dixon. They've used a couple other guys, but really I do think they could use some depth outside. So I think you'll see him in the mix. I just don't think you'll see a lot of plays from him this year, but keep an eye on him for next year. I do think he's a guy that will be a big part of their offense next season.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. Very well said. Switching gears, Buckeyes favored by 16.5 tomorrow at Illinois, the wind tunnel known as Memorial Stadium. Now, it's not supposed to be as windy as usual. Pretty good weather, especially for this time of the year. 60 degrees, sunny, winds of only 12 miles an hour. Of course, that's 12 miles an hour outside the stadium. Inside the stadium will still probably be 50 miles an hour. But as I said, Buckeyes favored by 16.5. Chris Spielman and Sean McDonough on the call. Game will begin at noon Eastern on ABC. Let's throw some predictions out there, BCast. How do you foresee this one going? And give me a final score prediction.
Well, I mean, great point about the wind. You don't even think about that normally when you're talking college football. But man, I mean, up there in those games in Champaign, it gets pretty windy and pretty cold. Like you said, inside the stadium, it can be pretty wild in there with the way the wind whips through. And no surprise, you're up there near the Windy City. So, and this game come a couple days earlier with some of the wind we've seen in the Midwest could have been pretty interesting to watch JT Barrett and the offense try to move the ball. The fact that it's going to be good weather definitely helps Ohio State. I think it'll allow them to be more aggressive. It'll allow them to use the passing game a little more. So I do think that Ohio State has struggled, historically, at least in the time that you and I have been covering the team. They've had some issues up there, even Illinois teams that weren't that great. Noon game, those are always tough for a team like Ohio State that's really gearing up for the home stretch against Michigan State and Michigan, and then the Big Ten championship. So it's really going to depend on this team. Do they come to play? Are they ready to play? I think getting JT Barrett back is huge. We saw the offense struggle quite a bit last week under the lights against Minnesota with Cardale Jones. So I think getting JT Barrett back, I do expect Ohio State to go up there and take care of business. I don't know that we're going to see we're going to see Illinois play at the level they did last week against Purdue. Obviously, they're a little bit of a different team now without Tim Beckman, and some of the things that were going on up there have been well documented. This is a team that struggled. You look at the 3 games before that, they struggled against Iowa, struggled against Wisconsin, struggled against Penn State. They lost 39-0 at Penn State on October 31st, and then last week they go to Purdue and win 48-14. So I think you're seeing a team that's got a little bit more momentum, a little bit more energy now that Beckman's gone, a little bit more positive. But I just don't see a team that's going to come out. I look at the numbers from that game. They had 2 guys go over 130 yards rushing in that game. Keyshawn Vaughn had 180 yards and 2 scores. So I just don't see them putting up those kind of numbers against this Ohio State defense. I think Ohio State will win handedly. I think they'll win somewhere in that neighborhood of maybe like a 48-17, 48-20 game. But they have struggled before in that stadium, as you and I both know. So wouldn't be shocking to see the offense struggle a little more than we anticipate with JT Barrett.
I thought this was going to be the first week I picked against Ohio State as far as covering. I'm picking Ohio State to win, but I thought the point spread would be something like 20, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to pick Illinois. But point spread only 16, now 16.5. I'm going to go with the Buckeyes barely to cover. I have them winning 35-17. As you mentioned, this is an Illinois team that looked terrible against Penn State and then looked excellent last week. Yeah, it was against Purdue, but Purdue is starting to come along, and Purdue, one thing about them, they play almost everybody close. Not last week. As you mentioned, Illinois had a couple guys go over 100 yards. They got their senior running back, Josh Ferguson, back. And as you mentioned, they have the true freshman, Keyshawn Vaughn. So a couple good running backs. They have a good quarterback in Wes Lunt. He's in his second year there after transferring from Oklahoma State. They have some good skill position players at the wide receiver spots. Offensive line is the weakness, as Chris Ash said. Defensively, Urban Meyer's been talking up their defensive line all week, and I understand why. These guys are big and athletic. They got a couple future NFL guys on that defensive line. It seems like Illinois, no matter how bad they are, they have a couple defensive linemen that are going to be NFL players no matter what. They always have a couple of defensive linemen. They also have some good secondary players, too. I'm going to give a shout-out to Mason Monheim. His dad's a member of our site. Mason Monheim's been a 4-year starter there, so they have a good linebacker in Mason Monheim, a good secondary. So I think this could be a tricky game. I could see this being somewhat close, some nervous moments, but I'm going to pick Ohio State to win, barely cover 35-17. Before I let you go, B-Cast, real quick, Ohio State's men's basketball season opener is on Sunday. The Buckeyes will host Mount St. Mary's. The game will tip off at noon on Sunday. The game will be televised on ESPNU. It seems like the last few years for these openers, the game hasn't been on TV. It's been on, Watch ESPN, only online. But this year, ESPNU, noon on Sunday. So a nice time there. You watch the Buckeye basketball team before the NFL kicks off, or at least an hour before the NFL kicks off. Mount St. Mary's was 15-15 last season. They're out of the Northeast Conference. My question for you, B-Cast, one returning starter on this basketball team, Jayshawn Tate, a lot of young, exciting players, though. If you had to bet right now, do you think this Ohio State basketball team will make the NCAA tournament this season?
Whew, that's a great question for this time of year. And like you said, one returning starter. I was, looking at some of the players and going through some of that this morning and last night, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, man, it is so bizarre to look at this roster and not see guys like Shannon Scott, Sam Thompson, and Amir Williams. I feel like they have been here since Thad Matta got here 12 years ago, it feels like almost. And I feel like we say that a lot because that'll have a couple of those guys that have been here forever, like Aaron Kraft, and I think Aaron Kraft played 6 or 7 seasons at Ohio State. And, but it is weird to look at the roster and, they've had young guys kind of come in and into the mix and mix in. Last year with D'Angelo Russell, obviously he was the star of the team, but you still had those seniors and you still have those guys that have been around forever. But this year you don't have that. Like you said, Jayshawn Tate, guy who didn't play in that exhibition game against Walsh is the only guy that really played a lot of minutes last year. Obviously, we know Mark Loving had played some minutes earlier in the season, but it's going to be interesting to see how this team develops. I think it's a little too early to think they're going to be a tournament team. They're going to struggle a little bit because they've got so many moving parts and new guys. I really like Jaquan Lyle and what he can bring at 19, 9, and 7 in that exhibition game. Again, just an exhibition game. But I think if he can run the offense, if he can come in and be that guy who can be a scorer and distributor, I think that changes things. What are they going to get from Trevor Thompson, a guy who sat out last season and was a transfer from Virginia Tech? I think he's a guy that could be a playmaker for them, just rebounding the ball, and they've needed that at the center spot. So they've got a couple guys in Diop and Loving and Jayshawn Tate that I think can go out and rebound and put the ball in the basket. So I like what they've got on the roster. If they get Mickey Mitchell back at some point, they've got Austin Grandstaff. I think they've got some nice pieces. But it's just hard for me to think a team this young is going to be able to come out and really string some nice wins together once they get into the Big Ten. It's going to be brutal. So I want to watch this team a little more before I call them an NCAA tournament team. But should be fun to watch, and I think a lot goes on Jaquan Lyle and what he can do with the ball in his hands. I think we'll know a lot more, as we get into the season.
Fantastic insights out of Brandon Castel. Thank you, BCast. Make sure you guys read his column, Inside the Brain of BCast. It is appointment reading. And if you're not a Bucknuts subscriber, try our buy 1 month, get 2 months free deal. It will run out next Friday. It's the best deal we have ever run here at Bucknuts. 3 months of Bucknuts for a total of $9.95. Make sure you take advantage of that while it still lasts. Thanks again to Brandon Castel, and thanks to you, the listener, for tuning into the show. I appreciate it and hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Take it away, best damn band in the land.